In 1968, Paul Yerger, a former lumberman who owned a farm in northern Berks County, Pennsylvania, in the shadow of a nearby mountain named the Pinnacle, decided to open a ski area. He was not himself a skier and had no experience in the ski industry. Instead, he made this decision in response to rumors that the Pennsylvania state government had plans to include parts of his land into a nearby state game preserve. To hold on to that land, he would need to make an improvement to it, which would be open to the public. And so the story of Hahn Mountain Ski Area began. But it would not start out as Hahn Mountain. In 1968, Yerger, with help from his children, friends, and a few hired hands, would build a ski area on the side of a ridge beside the Pinnacle. He cut the trails largely by himself, constructed a lodge, installed snowmaking, and a double chairlift and T-bar purchased from Hall. The ski area was open for the 1969-1970 winter season as Big Valley. The family lived alongside the slopes and did much of the day-to-day work operating the area. Big Valley was incorporated in 1971 with Paul Yerger as president and manager. But the dip into the ski world did not last long. Yerger sold Big Valley only 2 years later after a poor winter. However, the area had become popular enough to gain a crowd of local skiers. It featured 500 feet of vertical drop on 9 or 10 different slopes and trails, which was fairly competitive at the time in the Mid-Atlantic. And so, Big Valley was sold for the sum of $220,000 to the owner of a firefighting company in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Robert Stavin likewise had no history in the ski business, nor was he a skier himself. His bank told him he was getting a bad deal. During his first 5 years in operation, the now dubbed Hahn Mountain never turned a profit. In his best year, Stavin lost $90,000. Still, he invested a large amount of capital into improvements at Hahn Mountain. The lodge was renovated, trails were widened, and a number of new diesel-powered, fan-driven snow guns were purchased from Hedco. Stavin had rows of pine trees planted along the lower mountain to separate the different slopes, giving the area its characteristic appearance which is seen from afar today. Yet despite these improvements, Hahn continued to flounder financially. The new snow guns turned out to produce an inferior quality of man-made snow, slush, or sometimes no snow at all. By the end of operations, Hahn snowmakers had resorted to using the original tripod-mounted guns left over from Big Valley. While the ownership remained upbeat, a burst snowmaking pipe caused the mountain to miss the 1983-1984 season in order to install an all-new water supply system. Plans to reopen for the 85-86 season were floated, but ultimately the mountain would remain closed permanently. In the end, Big Valley Hahn Mountain would operate for only 14 seasons, from 1969 to 1983. While never a financial success, Hahn Mountain was nonetheless popular with locals. Many learned to ski at Hahn, and while the mountain returns to nature, the skiers and memories it produced continue on. Hello, and welcome to the Lost Ski Area series. I'm Avery Zucco, and today we're checking out Hahn Mountain outside Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Hahn Mountain opened in 1969 as Big Valley and closed in 1983. It's one of the larger lost ski areas in Pennsylvania, coming in at around 500 vertical feet, and it's probably one of the more well-known lost areas because it had a pretty big core of local skiers, a lot of whom are still active. And so it's one of those places that you still hear a lot about, and it's one of the places that I was kind of excited to go and check out myself. So this was the base lodge, which was a pretty big structure for the time it was built in '69, and it's been renovated once in the mid-'70s when the ownership changed, and it went from Big Valley to Hahn Mountain. I believe this side part here was added by Hahn Mountain. And it's all boarded up. You can't go inside. You can kind of see in. The interior is not original to the lodge anymore. It was renovated sometime in the early 2000s, I think, for use as a summer camp. But those plans never went anywhere, and they just sort of boarded the place up and let it go. So it's just been sitting since then, unfortunately. This is looking out towards the parking lot, which is all overgrown. then this is walking out towards, I believe, the ski rentals, which are at the far end of the building. There was a kind of like a club and a game room on the bottom level. I think all of that is gone now. I don't know if it was lost in the renovation or what. But yeah, it's a pretty big lodge. You know, for the late 60s, for a ski area in Pennsylvania. And Hahn Mountain was a pretty substantial ski area for that time period. So this is walking around the, if you're looking up the mountain, the right side of the lodge towards the double chair. And this is the remains of the double chair. You can see the conduits for the electrical there. That's all been cut. And the ruins of the, I guess, the drive house here. There's a metal roof that's collapsed. And this would have covered the double chair, the drive for the double chair. It was a hall, pretty common chairlift that you see a lot of at this time in the late 60s, early 70s. And this is the footer, which I found kind of interesting. I've seen some pictures that show the lift on rails, like most hall chairlifts are at this time. The counterweight is back there in the weeds. And so they dismantled everything. So when the area closed in the mid-80s, some time after maybe the late 80s or early 90s, they removed all of the lift infrastructure. And I don't know what happened to this chairlift. I don't know if it was saved and moved somewhere else or if it was just destroyed. And then this is the west side of the lodge. It's a nice window, and I like the board and batten, kind of a rustic feel to it. So now we're looking up the slopes. So the lower part of the mountain was just an open field, and when the ownership changed to Hahn Mountain, they planted these rows of pine trees, which have grown up in the years since, and they really do shade out the slopes now. But at the time, when people were still skiing here, it was all very wide open, and there wasn't really definition between the different slopes on the lower mountain. Okay, so this is over on the other side of those trees, looking up the mountain to the left, and this was the T-bar line. So the double chair went to the top, and then the T-bar line went about halfway up. So this is looking up the T-bar line, which is all overgrown now. The pine trees have grown up over it, and it's just sort of becoming overgrown. The footers are still here, and that's about it. I believe this was a Poma T-bar. It was either a Poma or a Hall, I'm not sure. It was installed at the same time as the double chair. And that was it for the lift infrastructure. There was a small rope tow on the other side of the hill for a beginner area. I didn't check that out. I don't know if there's anything remaining of that, but it was pretty much just these two lifts. And this is looking down. This side was called Sitzmark, and I think the other side was called Hawk's Landing. And this is looking out towards the pinnacle. The whole mountain is in the sort of the shadow of the pinnacle out here near the Appalachian Trail outside Hamburg. And this is the top of the T-bar, the lift shack for the T-bar here. And this is the top of the double chair. So hiking up, I didn't film the hike up because I was dodging, you know, bushes and trees and tree limbs and stuff like that, and so I had the camera off. But this is the top of the double chair. The trails are pretty well filled in now. They're pretty overgrown. The bottom slopes are still mowed and kept open, but the trails up top have just been let, go back to nature. This was the operator's shack for the double chair, which is kind of neat. It's in this octagonal shape. These were the original lift shacks from Big Valley that they built. They didn't build new ones or anything like that. And I don't know how much longer this guy has to stand. It's looking pretty rough. Some of the electrical stuff is still in there. The emergency stop. It's all rusted shut. But yeah, kind of a cool little design.
Oh, that is rusted shut, but that's gonna come right off. So let's leave that be.
And the unload would be pretty much right where I'm standing. And so there's a flat area that they graded out up top here, looking back down the mountain. This was a run called Fox Run or Fox Lane or something like that. This actually didn't have snowmaking on it. All the other trails except one had snowmaking. And you can see the hydrants. I don't think I show any hydrants in the video, but the hydrants are dotted all around. So this is the top area that's sort of graded off. It's actually open up top. It's like a little meadow here up top, but the rest of the trails are overgrown. And so this is walking east over the top of the mountain. You can kind of see a little trail there on the right. That was called Proposed, which you had to sort of skate up to. That also didn't have snowmaking. And then there were 3 trails from the top of the double chair. This is the beginning of one. And then there's the far trail out here to the right. So there were 3. There were 2 intermediates and 1 most difficult trail. This is going down the farthest to the skier's right of the intermediate trails. And the pitch is actually pretty decent. I would say there's a good stretch in there of at least 100, 200 vertical feet of like solid 30, 35 degree pitch. Again, looking back to the west, back towards the pinnacle. The views are fantastic also. It's a beautiful mountain. And so you've got about 500 vertical feet to deal with. You've got a decent steep pitch. I believe the expert trail they let bump up as well. And the mountain isn't very wide. It's just the 3 trails from the top and then the 2 slopes at the bottom. But there's a decent length to the trails. And it seems like it was challenging for its time. It was unfortunate that the place closed, and it's surprising that it closed as soon as it did. Unfortunately, the management really just was never able to turn a profit from the mountain, and it just wasn't sustainable to keep it open, which is a shame that more people didn't get to experience it. But the people that did experience it all have great things to say and great memories of Hahn Mountain. So once again, thanks for watching. If you like this and you want to see more, drop a like and a subscribe. Until then, I'll see you next time.